Good afternoon, everybody. It is AFC NFC Championship Day. I gave you guys and girls my prediction on both games that will take place today to determine who will represent the AFC and who will represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Obviously, you can go to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel and tune into that in the Thomas Take Library, as I like to call it. But as I sit here in the office today and really go over what took place last night in terms of some of the mixed martial arts action that was offered to us by ESPN Plus, ESPN, the first UFC event on ESPN Plus. It was a great event. Really fantastic fights that made sense, fights that will spawn into other fights, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But, the main event was the talk of this event, per usual, as it should be. But this main event in particular, there are situations where cards are offered to us as MMA fans, and they might not feature the best main event. The co-main event might be looked at as better. And I really will throw you the next pay-per-view event, UFC 234, Robert Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum, the main event for the UFC middleweight title. And then Israel Adesanya versus Anderson Silva in the co-main. I'd rather see the co-main, really. I'm more looking forward to the co-main of that card than the main event. Obviously, to the fact that Anderson Silva is a massive name still in the sport, everything that he's accomplished, and Israel Adesanya is an up-and-coming fighter. But this event here offered us a great main event that I was really, really excited to watch. And the main event only lasted 32 seconds. Henry Cejudo, the victor of this fight by TKO stoppage versus TJ Dillashaw. Before I dive into the stoppage and everything like that, despite the fact that this was a 32-second fight, that this fight lasted 2 seconds longer than half of a minute for a fight that was promoted heavily by the company, a fight that was promoted heavily by ESPN, a fight that was really in the making for quite some time, due to the fact that Demetrius Johnson, the then flyweight champion, was supposed to fight TJ Dillashaw for quite a while. It just never happened. Demetrius didn't want to make that fight. Demetrius gets Henry Cejudo. Cejudo beats Demetrius Johnson, and here we are with Cejudo and Dillashaw. Cejudo was willing to take on TJ Dillashaw. Cejudo was willing to possibly lose his belt to a champion in what was his first title defense last night. But he was willing to take the chance on that. He wasn't willing to lose it. He was willing to take the chance. Willing to sign the bottom line of that contract. And I think that has to be respected. I think if you have a cap on, you got to tip your cap to Henry Cejudo for doing that, because it provided the fans with a unique opportunity to watch a special fight. And despite the fact that this fight only lasted 32 seconds, I thought Henry Cejudo dominated those 32 seconds. He went out there, cut off TJ Dillashaw, landed his own shots, and finished it ultimately in the first round. Now, there's a lot of controversy after this fight due to the fact that it was a ref stoppage. The ref stepped in and decided to call the action. He said to himself that he had seen enough. And so many people are going to be on both sides of this, or one side or the other. So many people are going to say, well, this was a quick stoppage. This stoppage was not worthy of a stoppage. It should have continued. It should have kept going. And then there's other people that'll say, no, that the stoppage was valid. It should have happened. It should have took place. There's no problem with that stoppage. And that's where I lie. That's my end of it. I had zero problem with the stoppage last night. I thought the stoppage was much needed. And after watching the fight several more times after the fact that it was over, I thought that this fight needed to be stopped. I thought TJ Dillashaw was hurt, was rocked, and was out on his feet and would have taken more punishment had that fight continued. TJ Dillashaw at one point pushed Henry Cejudo down, or tried to push Henry Cejudo off of him, and Cejudo pushed Dillashaw down to the mat with one hand. And I want to say maybe that was because he was rocked, but I could also throw you the fact that he had cut 10 extra pounds heading into this fight as the UFC bantamweight champion. 135 pounds, he cut 10 extra pounds to make the 125-pound flyweight championship weight limit. And maybe he was just too weak. Maybe he didn't put the weight back on to the rate that he thought he would. And TJ Dillashaw wants to get right back in there at flyweight, fight this fight again. And I think that is one of the worst ideas that I've ever heard a fighter have coming off of a loss. I know TJ Dillashaw feels like he got cheated. I know TJ Dillashaw feels as if there was a lot left to be desired in that fight, that it should have continued. I understand that from his perspective. He lost. He's going to poke, prod, and push his way to try to get that fight booked again to redeem himself, because it didn't go his way the first time. No matter who lost this fight, whether it was Cejudo, whether it was Dillashaw, these fighters would have wanted to run it back. Whoever was the loser of this bout. It remains to be seen whether that will happen, and I don't think it should right away. I think TJ Dillashaw needs to take some time off, get the weight back properly, and fight at the weight class that he's meant to fight in at bantamweight. This was a attempt by TJ Dillashaw to go kill the division known as the UFC flyweight division, and he failed. Despite whatever circumstances that he believes were the cause of him failing, he got caught with a kick and a punch, and he was out on his feet. I've never seen a guy's head move around off of his neck like that outside of Bisping versus Rockhold. Dillashaw was hurt badly. Whether he recovered quickly or not, or whether he's recovered quickly in the past, I don't want to hear the notion that, this was a champ versus champ fight. You got to let them fight longer. I understand that notion to a degree. I've used that notion in other instances with other refs, but those instances and notions don't pertain to stoppages. They pertain to allowing a fighter to stay in top position on the mat, on the floor of the octagon. And I'll throw you an example of Khabib versus Conor. I thought they let Khabib maintain his top position for the first round for far too long. You look back at the statistics of that fight. Khabib was in top position for over 4 minutes of a 5-minute round and really hadn't landed many shots. That fight in that round, that first round, probably should have been stood up. And I'm not saying that as a fan of either guy. I'm saying that as a fan of the fighting game of this great sport, that when there's a guy on top of another guy and he's not landing many punches, you got to stop it. But Henry Cejudo was landing punches over and over and over again. I was texting my dad before the fight took place. He was watching it at home on his tablet. I was watching it at home on my PlayStation. And we were texting, and I said, hey, Henry Cejudo, he hits hard. Henry Cejudo had 5 knockouts. Cejudo had 5 knockouts prior to fighting TJ Dillashaw. Cejudo had 5 knockouts at 125 pounds. This guy hits hard. And I think it is well known that wrestlers seemingly have the upper body strength for obvious reasons, to where they have power that they didn't even know that they had, because they have strength, they have grip, they have just this tight, I don't know what to call it, tight frame in which they know how to throw power punches. I'll throw you Dan Henderson as a obvious example. I'll throw you Chuck Liddell as another obvious example. 2 guys that were D1 wrestlers, Henderson and Olympian, that, could punch. And I think Cejudo falls in that category. I think Cejudo at 135 pounds would be just as good in certain matchups as he is at 125. And I feel like Cejudo won't get the credit that he deserves for this win, and I don't think that's fair. He cut the ring off. He cut off Dillashaw. He landed great punches. He finished Dillashaw in 32 seconds. He bested Demetrious Johnson in a split decision, but albeit it was a victory. And it was one that I think was a heck of a victory. To have wins over Demetrious and Dillashaw, Henry Cejudo deserves to get the credit that he deserves. And furthermore, when you lose, please don't say, I didn't lose, I wasn't beaten. You were beaten, TJ. You lost. It's okay. Fighters lose sometimes. You lost. You lost to John Dodson, you lost to Dominic Cruz, and you lost to Henry Cejudo. Those are three guys that two of them are champions. One of them easily could have been a champion, depending on how the Demetrious Johnson fights went. If Demetrious Johnson wasn't in that weight class, I think John Dodson at that time probably would have been the UFC flyweight champion. Maybe Joseph Benavidez could have something to say about that, but that's just a possibility for the sake of argument. I really thought that this was an interesting fight. Would I eventually like to see it run back 100%? But I don't know how that makes sense in the immediate future. This wasn't a sold-out event. TJ's got challengers at his weight class at bantamweight. Marlon Moraes is in the waiting against Rafael Assunção, who TJ is 1-1 against Assunção. Maybe that's not the sexiest matchup in comparison to Cejudo versus Dillashaw, but I feel like Henry Cejudo just saved the UFC flyweight division. But Dana White is very coy on that. He's very up in the air about that, and I don't think that's right. I think this fight saved the flyweight division for the UFC, and I think Henry Cejudo should fight Joseph Benavidez next. See if Cejudo can avenge that loss to Benavidez. We'll find out. But nonetheless, I was really happy to keep everybody informed and posted up to date on my Twitter account. You can follow me at Ryan Thomas Take. And it's been a great, great month so far for the podcast. It's been a great, great month for me. I look forward to putting out more content, more information, and hey, we got a lot to talk about in the world of boxing as well. For all the boxing fans out there, stay tuned. Don't go away. Keep it on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was my take on Henry Cejudo versus TJ Dillashaw, the aftermath. Cejudo winning the fight, 32 seconds, technical knockout. Some controversy after the fight. TJ Dillashaw not really willing to consider this as a loss. Dillashaw believes that he needs to run it back. They need to run it back. That everybody should feel like this fight needs to be run back. And I disagree. Take care. Have a great day. Everybody stay safe. Drive safe. It is a snowy, snowy weekend in Western New York. But don't go away. Stay up to date on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. We'll be right back.